But provinces and territories are also looking for common ground on issues such as appropriate wait times between a request for and the provision of physician-assisted dying, how to protect conscience rights of providers in ways which avoids limiting access to patients who may seek physician aid in dying, data collection, monitoring and reporting, and research. These are issues which may be best addressed through pan-Canadian approaches led or coordinated by the federal government in conjunction with other partners. Thank you for the question. I'm not sure, are you asking for the distinction as to how these are defined in each of the two languages, or are you simply asking for the distinction between euthanasia and assisted suicide?
Yes, euthanasia. We've seen different terms being used in the reports. So just to talk to us a little bit about that in terms of how your department would be working with this issue.
Yeah. Well, I think that I guess maybe the first thing that I would say is that our general understanding, although I know colleagues from the Department of Justice spoke in some detail about this the other day, is that we would regard the Supreme Court decision as having addressed both euthanasia and assisted suicide. And I think that probably the most important, one of the most important considerations is simply that euthanasia, in effect, involves an act taken directly by, in this case, a legitimate authorized medical provider who actually is personally and directly responsible for taking steps to hasten death of an individual. Assisted suicide engages the provider in a significant way, but at the end of the day, it's actually the individual who wishes to bring their life to an end who actually administers the medication that will hasten their death. So in effect, the most important distinction is who provides advice and who administers medication that hastens a death. Then within those categories, there are you'll find in various of these reports descriptions of voluntary euthanasia, involuntary euthanasia, and so on. But those are kind of subcategories of those two essential distinctions.
Health Canada's perspective, what is the difference between voluntary euthanasia and physician-assisted dying? So I wasn't quite sure in your definitional answer. I understand involuntary euthanasia, but the difference between voluntary euthanasia and physician-assisted dying, because both have a volitional portion. If you have an answer.
Well, just I suppose the most obvious dimension of that is that physician-assisted dying could entail providing somebody, providing they've gone through all the appropriate steps to demonstrate competence and informed consent and so on. Physician-assisted dying could include advising an individual how to actually accelerate their own death, whereas euthanasia is actually the authorized medical personnel administering the generally speaking, medication that would cause death. So
but one death could be the same.
I guess I would say voluntary euthanasia is one form of physician-assisted dying.
Thank you.
Help us by identifying 2 or 3 or 4 issues that you think there would be a clear expectation of federal leadership on those issues?
Yeah. Well, look, I would say, first of all, the question of is it euthanasia and assisted suicide, or one or the other. Issues around conscience rights and how those should be respected, and the implications of respecting them with regard to access, eligibility issues, issues around age, any further elaboration that might be brought to bear on what constitutes, the further detail on the criteria that the Supreme Court set out around suffering, irremediable illness, grievous condition, all of that. whether or not, I mean, there's been a lot of controversy about whether or not mental illnesses should be included, so that's connected to that.